I can never beat her, Chris. The lady, she's way too fast. The recording lady, you know. Hey there,
It is very
everybody.
tough.
Exactly. Hey there, everybody. This is Kenny. This is the Pause for a Minute podcast, and I told you I would find you some terrific guests that will inspire you to continue to grow in your faith. And we're going to focus a little bit today on youth ministry and really talking about our youth and how do we just do better with our youth. And so I have this terrific pastor who is willing to give some time today to talk a little bit about his journey and give some advice on some things that we should be doing with our youth. So welcome to the Pause for a Minute podcast to Pastor Chris Polzella. Chris, welcome. Chris is in the building. How are you, man?
I'm good, man. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, no, thank you, man, for taking the time. And I know I want to talk actually at the end about work-life balance because you
Thank you.
definitely epitomize that. So thank you, man, for taking the time. It's a Saturday afternoon and there's a
Oh,
million other
absolutely.
things. Yeah, there's a million other things I know you could be doing, but thanks so much for taking the time with us.
Nah, I'm glad to be here. This is a priority, man. This is good stuff.
Awesome. Well, listen, I want to actually go back and I want to find out a little bit about how you grew up. And I'm pretty sure you grew up here on Long Island. And I know your dad is just this wonderful guy. I met your mom once as well, but I've met your dad several times. And he's a pastor. And so I want to find out a little bit about your childhood. What was it like growing up with your dad as a pastor?
Yeah. It's a. It was great, and it was hard. At the same time. It's my dad is somebody that I've always admired and looked up to because he epitomizes to me someone that lives the faith. Right. I saw him on Sunday, but he was exactly the same Monday through Saturday. And to me that solidified the faith was real. So in that sense, it was great. It was amazing. I say hard because growing up in the church, you are held to a different standard as a pastor's child, right? Everybody does look at you differently. You have to be who they expect you to be, and you see that a lot of times, right? That a lot of times pastors' kids would struggle with that because it is a weight that you carry that isn't spoken about, but it is something that you have. Undeniably, it's definitely there. And so growing up, my aunt, my dad's aunt, so my great aunt was actually a pastor of a church called the Branch of Faith Church in Port Jeff. And that is where we grew up, and my dad was the associate pastor there.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very family oriented atmosphere, obviously. But that was the church that I grew up in. I grew up in Port Jeff, right off Jane Boulevard and Old Town Road over there. So pretty close to Christ Church, and that church over there. And so that's where I grew up. That's the church that I was in. And so, being a pastor's son, and I have two brothers, so the three of us, like I said, it was great in the sense that I was at the church all the time, which when I was a kid, I didn't love necessarily, but looking at it now, I appreciate it because we were there for Bible studies and for food pantries and for worship practice and for anything going on at the church. We lived down the road, and so we were there all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was great, and it was also, I would say, it was hard. It was difficult to kind of live to that standard all the time that you feel like people have for you. So it was kind of a combination of both things, I would say.
Wow. That's interesting and awesome at the same time. Um, so Chris, when did you know? When did you know that God was in you? When did you really accept that? Was it at an early age? Did you go through like a rebellious time as a teen? When did you really know that, hey, God is just I got this, man. I feel it. I know exactly
Mm,
what my dad is talking about.
mm. That's a great question. So for me, growing up, I always knew that God was real, right? I always believed that he was real. Um, but and I feel like a lot of kids growing up in church deal with this, that it faith was not my own though. It was not my own. It was my parents' faith, right? I know they believe, and so we're good. And so growing up in the church, I believed God existed, but that didn't really mean anything for me, right? It didn't affect or change my life too much. And I didn't make a conscious decision until a little bit later that I want to follow Jesus. So growing up, I knew, and if you said, "Do you believe in God?" I said, "Of course, yeah, of course He exists." But if you were to ask me, "What does that mean for your life?" I couldn't tell you. Um, until I never, thankfully, really, I never really went through a rebellious stage too much. I've always been,
Hmm.
someone that's wanted to do the right thing. I feel like,
Hmm.
and doesn't mean I haven't struggled or done things, but thankfully, I feel like God has kind of kept me from, going off the deep end, so to speak, which a lot of kids do struggle with and deal with. Um, but when I figured out it was my own, I was, I think I was around 12 or 13. My older brother was going to a youth group, and I was an extremely shy kid growing up and never wanted to do public speaking or really talk to anybody. I was fine being left alone. Just leave me alone. I'm good. But the, yeah, but the youth pastor of that church was a friend of my dad's, and he actually specifically asked him if I could come on a retreat they were going on, and that I could stay with him and my brother, and like I wouldn't be alone type thing. And my initial reaction was, no, I don't know anybody there. I'm not going. It's just my brother, and I know he has friends, so he's not going to be hanging out with me. And so my initial reaction was absolutely not. I'm not. But the fact that he took the time to ask for me to go actually meant a lot to me. And so I said, all right, I'll try it. I'll go.
Mm.
And I went, and it was a conference. It was upstate, and it was just kind of like a worship conference that a lot of youth went from around the country. And it was at that conference, there was one of the speakers there just talking about, when you leave here, are you gonna walk away with this faith being your own, or are you gonna just keep basically being fake, essentially. And felt like the Lord actually spoke to me there, and it was there that I realized, wow, this is a personal thing. And I always had in my head, like, when I'm older, when I'm married, I'll follow, I'll do the stuff that God wants me to do. But I'm just a kid right now, right? I'm 13, well, doesn't matter. But from there, the Lord had a call on my life. Actually, I really felt like He was saying, "Follow me." Now, because it's going to matter now what you do, and not in 10 years or 20 years, but actually right now.
Wow.
It matters, and it matters because it was right at that time too. I started getting a whole bunch of new friends in my life, and my life was starting to expand. And so I was starting to realize that, wow, God was putting pieces in my life that I could have an influence on, that um, I don't want to just waste that opportunity. And so it was at that conference that I fully gave my life over to God. And I said, I want to follow you, and I want to do what it is you want me to do, even though I don't feel equipped. I don't feel like, to have the thought that I would actually go in front of a congregation and preach was beyond anything I could ever imagine. Like I would be frozen in fear. But thankfully I did say, God, I want to do what you want, and so I'll do it if that's what you want me to do. And so it was at that conference things started to change for me. Of course, it's not like I went home and all of a sudden I'm preaching and stuff like that. It was a slow journey, but it was there that I fully made that commitment that, hey, I want to follow this, and I want to pursue this, and I want my life to be different than it is right now.
Wow.
So that kind of fits into as to why, to the beginning of why youth has meant so much to me, was because it was there. at just some random conference that a random youth pastor invited me to, that literally started to change my life. And that's what God used, which was pretty amazing.
Wow. What I mean, I don't even know what to say because I didn't know a lot of this about you, and it clears up one question because I was going to ask you why youth ministry, and I do want to
Well,
expand on that
yeah,
a little bit.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
but that is just such an amazing story how it touched you, and I love that you said you're just got to a point where you were going to do what God is asking you to do, and you're such a talented speaker, and so how many people would have missed out on when you've gotten the opportunity to preach. um
mm,
so let's jump into that then with youth ministry because that's how I got to know you. You were the
yeah, yeah.
youth pastor at Christ Church for a long time, and I saw you work from afar. I saw the impact you had on my kids, still have, and I just, man, this guy does something. He's got like a magic touch with the youth. Talk a little bit more about that, so we understand a little bit now how you got led there. But now you're in the job, and our youth ministry back then, I
Yeah.
think everyone will admit, was pretty broke, and you really brought it back to life almost immediately. Talk a little bit about some of the steps that led you to really touch all those kids.
Yeah, no, thank you. That I I, I really appreciate all those words. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, it was kind of a long journey. I feel like um, talking about when I was 13. After that, I plugged into a local youth group at Three Village Church. It was called Satellite Youth Group.
Mhm.
The youth pastor there was a guy named Dan White, and he had a profound effect on my life at that point too, where he just invested in me. He just he I don't know, he saw something, I guess, and he connected with me, and I'd meet with him every now and then. We'd just talk about life, and he would point me in the direction of Jesus, right? And it again, another youth pastor, it literally changed my life, where I was like, wow, I want to do this one day. I want to be able to be used of God in this way, because it wasn't just me. It was we had well over 100 kids in this youth group, and I felt like it was amazing that he chose to hang out with me, right, when he had so many other people to hang out with. And I appreciated that. And so it was kind of from there that I went to a Bible school in Binghamton, called Davis Bible College, and it was honestly, it was awesome. I loved it. I had so many great professors that had so many great teaching skills, and taught me so much. And it was there that my youth pastor Dan from Long Island had moved up to Binghamton, and he was at a different youth group, and so I was able to plug in there, and that was the
Wow.
first time I really started doing leadership, in any capacity, where I was just a leader there. I led small groups. Again, it was another huge youth group. It was over 100 kids. They did a lot of stuff, and so they needed tons of leaders. We had about 15, 16 leaders, and so I would just had a small group of guys that I was able to plug into and have a small group with. But it was cool because I was able to see how a huge youth group runs, and how they do things, and which was interesting. It's different than a smaller youth group, right? It's the dynamics are just so different.
Mhm.
Um, but I was able to plug in there, and that was actually the first time I ever spoke in front of a group of people. I did one of the lesson series there, which I was terrified to do, but they gave me the opportunity, and I actually I was terrified to do it, and then at the end I actually enjoyed it. Um, but it was there that I graduated from there, and then I got plugged into another local church. I moved back here. I had met Melissa, and we were engaged. We were going to get married, and her her home church growing up was Grace, looking for just youth help there. There was a guy named Anthony Sisteri, who also has had a huge impact on my life, just plugging in and pouring into my life, that he was looking for, just help at his youth group. And so right after college, and again, just kind of, I did a lot of the lessons there, and I did a lot of the small groups and just plugging in and pouring into kids' lives there. And it was interesting. I kind of from there, it was kind of tough leaving there, because I kind of had the thought that maybe I would take over that youth group, possibly. Just some things where there's always been a question of, I'm a very quiet person, and I'm a very reserved kind of personality, and it doesn't really fit with youth group. It just doesn't, in a lot of ways, and for a lot of people. And so leaving there, that was kind of where it had gone, and I left, and I was honestly pretty defeated, because I felt like maybe I wasn't supposed to do anything with youth. Maybe I had gone in the wrong direction. Had
Wow.
felt like, I don't have the right personality for it. How could God use me? And I left that church. Actually, we left it, Melissa and I. And my plan was, for at least a year, I was going to do no ministry. I was going to just be in church. We didn't know where we were going to go. We didn't know what we were going to do, and we were just going to be somewhere.
Hmm.
That was my goal, and that was my plan. And my father-in-law heard through the grapevine from somebody that Christ Church was looking for a youth pastor. And he told me about it. He brought it up to me, and I was like, I'm not Methodist. I can't go there. That doesn't make any sense, right?
Right.
But him and Melissa, they were kind of pushing me that, hey, just doesn't hurt. Just put your resume in there. Just try it. It doesn't matter. So eventually I did. I connected with Carl Pizzo, and I talked to him, and then I put my resume, and then again, just thinking nothing was going to come of it. And it was probably solid like 2 months that I didn't hear anything. So I just assumed this is going nowhere, and that's fine. Like, I'm fine with that. I'm planning on just sitting in church for a year and doing nothing. That was my plan. Just to kind of recuperate, because again, it was a tough leave, and it was, just some internal stuff going on for me. And then I randomly got an email from Pastor Andy, and he said, hey, I'd love to meet with you. I got your resume, and I'd love to talk. Again, my initial reaction was, this is going nowhere. This is probably pointless. I don't want to waste his time, but okay, I'll go. And so I met up with him, and Pastor Andy, he was the nicest. He still is the nicest man that I've ever met in my life.
Yeah.
And in that meeting, my whole perspective on everything changed, to where I was like, wow, God, maybe this is where I feel like I need to be. It was just kind of like the landing spot that I needed at that time. And so, just I left there feeling, I guess, rejuvenated, and I didn't know if he wanted me. I didn't know exactly what was going on, but, he called me back, and then I got the opportunity to meet with you and Miss Kay and Rod, and that was awesome. And, was blessed to be given that opportunity. And so I had never run a youth group myself at that point. I had been in many youth groups. I had seen how they were ran by some amazing people. So I kind of just had a good, I guess, just base of, this is how, you should do it. So, going in, it was, again, I was scared of, what if we fail? What if I don't connect? What if, I don't have that personality, that you feel like you think of as youth pastor necessarily.
Right.
So it's kind of always something I struggle with. And so going in, I was nervous, but I felt like God had opened that door, and it was just kind of need to take that step and just trust that he's going to do something with it, whatever it is. And so, again, we had the opportunity to start, and we, I always talk about, we had our first meeting, and only Danielle showed, only one that came. And so again, it was kind of like, oh, are we doing the right thing? Should we be doing this? And, just felt like God was saying, just trust me, and just take that step of faith. And so then the next week we suddenly had 12 kids show up. It was bizarre. It was weird, but it was a God thing,
Yeah.
and it was, and and we connected, and just you poured into my life all those years, and just getting to know you and Pastor Rand. I've had so many great men in my life that have helped lead me towards Christ. I can't say what has helped all these years. And so, I had the opportunity to do that at Christ Church, and it was amazing. It was an amazing 8 years there, and just getting the opportunity to do that and start something and see it become something that I never thought it would. Right? I never
Mhm.
knew that it could.
Mhm. Mhm.
But felt like God had something.
No doubt. Wow.
Yeah.
I part the last part of that I remember so well. And it what an amazing journey. I got to tell you, man, I can't let you go without taking advantage of your expertise here, because I do think you won't say this, I will. I think that when it comes down to youth ministry, you become a bit of an expert of what kids are looking for, which is amazing, because even though you're still really young, you are like a generation removed from a lot of these kids, but yet you know exactly what they need. So if there's going to be a lot of people that listen
Yeah.
to this or watch this, and they are really trying to get their youth ministry jump started. And there's kids out there that are looking, right? What's two or three pieces of advice that you would have if I'm just starting as a youth pastor, or I'm I'm pastoring a church and I'm really trying to get my youth group off the ground? What's two or three things that you feel kids really look for that brings them in these days?
Mm, yeah. That's a great question. You know, I, I feel like, at least for me, um, one piece of advice, at least for a church looking, is, I think a lot of times churches have the idea that it has to be this big, flashy, big event, big thing to get youth in.
Mm,
And I really feel like kids are looking for authenticity, right? They just want something real.
yeah.
Whether that's, you're just hanging out with them talking, or you have a big event that's fun. Which, again, there's nothing wrong. Kids love stuff like that. But I, I think that a lot of times in church, that's kind of where we go. We have to have this big thing to get the kids in, without realizing that kids just want something real, because they're in school where things are not real, right? They're on social media where nothing is
Wow.
real.
Wow.
And so they're struggling with authenticity,
Wow.
and you hear that all the time, right? And so I think that that's huge. And I think the second thing is what kind of gets lost, I think, a lot of times, is relationships with kids, right? Just being there. I think there's something to being present, and being consistent, I think, means something, right? I feel like maybe that was one of the best things I look at that I did at Christ Church, was maybe there was one kid that came that week, but they knew if they came the next week, I was going to be there, right? And we would be there as a youth group. And I think that that's important, that there's a sense of consistency, because,
Wow.
again, a lot of these kids, they're coming from broken homes, they're coming from broken schools and broken relationships, and they want something they can hold on to and know isn't going to go away. And so if you're there, you're consistent, you're real, that's a representation of Jesus, right? And that's how you can then say, hey, I feel this way, I live this way because Jesus has changed my life, right? I
Mhm.
think it goes without saying, and I think it's so important that as a pastor, that you live what you preach, right? That we're the same exact way that we are on Wednesday night or Sunday night or Tuesday night, that we are at work or we are at home,
Mhm.
that we're consistent with that. I think that that matters, because kids see through fakeness. Um, I know I did growing up, right? You could always sense when somebody was a leader that didn't want to be a leader, or was there just because they had to be there. You could
Yeah.
always tell that.
Yep.
And so if you're real, I think that that really just shows the love of Christ more than anything, because Jesus changed my life. So that's why I come here every single week to be with you. It's not that I'm, getting paid, or that, this is some great, just society looks at it like it's some great thing, because it really doesn't, right? But it matters because Jesus changed my life. So I'm, being consistent, being real, being authentic, and not skipping over those little things, that maybe two kids came to youth group that night, but that's two lives that you could pour into,
Yes.
right? It doesn't
Yes.
matter if it's 20, 50, or 100.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it matters because God put two lives in your life that night that you can do something with. And so I'm not saying I've always been great at not missing that, but
Yeah.
I've something that I've learned through the years is don't overlook that. Whatever it's small or big, God's given you an opportunity, and that's not something to take lightly.
Yeah. Wow, just fantastic advice, man. Being real, building those relationships, being consistent. I jotted those down. I think that that's going to go a long way. And you really inspired me because right now I'm doing youth group here at the church, and tonight I'm expecting two kids, and I've never
Nice.
felt, yeah,
Nice.
I've never felt a way like that. But you really put it more in perspective. Those are two lives that that can be impacted, and that's a God thing, no doubt.
Yeah,
Um,
it is. It is. Absolutely.
I could talk for you all day. We could probably talk for the next hour or two about the Mets, and
Yeah.
about a bunch of other things. I do have one last quick thing for you, and your work-life
Sure.
balance. I don't know how you do it. You've got a beautiful young family, 3 kids now, and 4 if you count your dog. And and of course
Yeah.
your just unbelievable wife, who I just obviously
Yeah.
I adore her, and you got a full-time job during the week,
Yeah.
and I know you've taken a little bit of a
Hmm.
step back from ministry, but you're ready to get back into it again, obviously soon. How do you balance everything?
Yeah. A lot of coffee, man. I, it is, it's a great question. I feel like I've bases that have been very honorable of that, right? So, to Pastor Randy, I think, is a great example of someone who gets that, who had a family, has
Right.
a family, and was a full-time pastor and doing this stuff, and understood, hey, you have family, so you can't be here every single night, right? You can't be here every single day. And he was great with that. And Pastor Sharon, and so many different pastors I've had through the years doing ministry have, been very graceful with that, I think. And, and and I think that it is hard, sometimes, to balance ministry and work and home and all of that stuff. And I think maybe just kind of putting into perspective what are the most important things, right? And of course, that's my relationship with my wife, and then with my kids, and before all of that, my relationship with God, and then
Mm,
to me it would be the ministry, right? And then it's work. And kind of, if you put them in that perspective, I feel like things kind of line up the right way. And it, again, it's not something easy, but it's something that I'll take. If say one day I am a pastor, say, of a church, I want to um, embody that for somebody else. That, hey, it matters, that you have time at home. It matters that you have rest time, right? You invest in your kids. That it's not all about being here and doing this. God's going to use you wherever you go and whatever you do. It doesn't have to be necessarily here. And so, I think sometimes that's a struggle, and people are in bad situations sometimes. But I've been blessed to be in good situations where those above me have realized that, and have been formula or secret key. I think the leadership that you have probably matters the most in those situations, I feel like.
no doubt. No doubt. Well said. Well said. Well, Pastor Chris, this has been a joy, a pleasure. I love talking to you. Such inspirational. Your story is so inspirational. Love also the advice that you've given today for youth ministry. I'm sure it is going to have an impact on a lot of people that will listen or watch this. So I want to thank you, man. And we got to get you back onto the sports. We got to get you back onto the sports on the positive tip and talk some October baseball here, you know?
Yeah, hopefully so. I hope. But thank you, though. Thank you so much for having me, though. It's been a pleasure. It's been awesome.
All right, man. Appreciate
Thank you so much for what you're doing and for what you always do for everybody.
Yeah, no, thank you, man. Thank you. All right, folks, I'm going to leave it there. Please share the heck out of this. For now, this has been Kenny and Pastor Chris. This has been the Pause for a Minute podcast. We'll talk to you real soon.